This week's episode has been sponsored by Oh My Bod, shifting the evolution of pleasure. Hi, this is Suzanne, and you're listening to Sex Advice for Seniors. And today, all the way from Los Angeles, I love how all my guests are just spread all over the world. I never know from one show to the next where they're going to be, half the time what we're going to talk about, quite frankly. But I like to keep it spontaneous. Show people always remark that it always sounds like I'm having a dinner conversation with people. And that's the way I like to do it that way. So welcome, Dr. Karen Stewart, to
Hi, thank you.
Sex Advice for Seniors. And you are a clinical psychologist. You work a lot with couples. You talk about sex. You talk about dating. I know that your resume is a mile long, and you have clients all over the place, really. But
Literally.
and I was looking at your website and I was thinking about, okay, what haven't we talked about on this show before? And we started diving into, with one of my other guests, what happens when people have had a recent mental health diagnosis like ADHD, for example. And I thought that was really interesting because I know that depression is quite common in later life, especially, I suspect, amongst men who may be struggling with trying to redefine themselves after stopping or slowing down their work and trying to figure out, who they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really want to talk about that and how depression kind of plays into people's sexual relationships.
So I think you're onto a really good point that I think a lot of people forget about. And I'm glad that you made that connection that, if the working man, we often start in our teens, if not 20s. So for the last, 30, if not 40 years, their identity has been, whether it has been a provider, a worker, whatever they were doing. Sometimes that starts fading when you get into, to later years. And if you're fortunate enough to be able to retire, you hit that big wall of, okay, now what? And that can lead to depression, when you have to re-identify yourself and recalibrate who you are at any age is challenging. But when, you're at a different stage in your life, maybe a later stage in your life, it is more challenging. So I have witnessed people having these vibrant, amazing lives. And then, whether it's again through retirement or unfortunately through aging or, even more unfortunately through health scares, depression can become very prevalent with these folks. And basically what that means for your sex life is, it's hard to be depressed and have a great sex life. It's hard to have that desire for your partner, even for yourself, when you're not feeling like yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And I know also that SSRIs or antidepressants can often lead to erectile dysfunction, which of course don't help the whole
That does not help. And it's funny. I don't prescribe medication. I'm a clinical psychologist, so I'm not a psychiatrist, but I can definitely speak on medications because probably 80% of my patients are on or have been on an SSRI. And
wow,
it's
that's huge.
It's huge. I mean, they're everywhere here. I mean, I live in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills area, and it's, if you think about the coastal cities in the United States, everybody has a shrink and a medication. So that's just kind of how we do it, as funny as that is. But yes, you're right about the SSRIs. It's this horrific problem where you go to your doctor, you say, hey, I'm experiencing A, B, and C. I just don't feel like myself. I'm down. I can't sleep, or I'm sleeping too much. I say, great, let's slap on these two medications. Well, a couple weeks from now, you realize I can't get an erection or I don't want to have sex. And you have this flat affect. And now your partner is saying, what the hell's going on? You went to the doctor. Why aren't you better? And then it starts this vicious cycle of affected self-esteem. They feel worse about themselves now because not only I need to take a medication to help me, and now I can't perform. It's challenging. Even they can't perform by themselves even sometimes, which is really challenging because it just, again, kills your self-esteem.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I was with somebody a long time ago and he was prescribed an antidepressant and then he found out he couldn't get it up. And then he literally just threw them in the bin, like just went, oh, screw this, and just threw them. And I was like, are you sure that's the right thing to do? Surely you need to wean yourself off these.
Yes,
like
you do.
chucking them in the bin because you can't get a hard on is probably not the best thing and way to remedy
Definitely
this
not the best thing.
situation. Right?
Yeah. Definitely not the best thing. I mean, that's a very nice dramatic picture for a romantic comedy or something, but not recommended medically to just, unless have taken them for like, say, 2 days, for instance. But if you've been on any medication for any length of time, please just call your doctor and say what you're going to do. I mean, that way they could say, all right, sir, you know what, chuck them in the bin by, Monday, but please give it 3 or 4 days. So
Yeah,
yes,
for
we
sure.
recommend it.
So as a psychologist, when you see, I mean, I'm shocked by the stats that you just gave me about
Yeah,
80%. I mean, that's really high. And I know that they are prescribed, antidepressants are prescribed, I guess, with more frequency than they are in the UK. I don't
yeah,
think, I mean, I'm just guessing. I don't know, but I do know people on antidepressants, but I suspect that number is higher than what we would see in the UK. So here you are, you're an older person, you're feeling down, you're no longer got the job to go to that gave you a sense
yeah.
of purpose. Your wife is wondering what the fuck you're doing
Mhm.
24/7 at home all the time when you used to go out and they never saw you and they had
Right.
some degree of independence. And now this person is hanging around all the time, morose and basically just pissing them off.
Yep.
Um, what do you just painting that kind of very
That's a
flattering
beautiful, perky picture. Yes, that's really lovely.
a really flattering picture of people. And what do you recommend in those scenarios? Like, what do you do?
First case, I would say if you're noticing your partner has really declined, and like, I love your word morose because that is such a powerful word that you could literally see of saying, I'm picturing this guy kind of ho hum, like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh walking around the house.
Yeah,
What I suggest, and I know it's so much harder than, easier said than done, but talk to your partner as calmly and nicely without judgment. The worst thing you can do is like, Joe, get off the damn couch. Like, what the hell are you still doing here? You haven't left the house. You haven't changed your clothes in 4 days.
all right.
Not helpful because if somebody's already experiencing some depression, so sit them down, tell them your experience. Like, I got to be honest, I've noticed you've been a little flat lately. Are you okay? You haven't changed your clothes in a couple days. Can I help you? Give them some softness first. And then maybe, and we can stereotype, we're both women here. Men sometimes have a really difficult time with launching and creating plans for themselves.
Yeah,
And, if you've had a female partner for many years, it's, I kind of don't know what to do without you. So maybe
yeah,
you need to help make the plans. Maybe it's, say, I've noticed this. So what I suggest is, hey, why don't you call that old buddy? You haven't gone bowling in, 2 months. Give him a
yeah,
call. Suggest things. If the person's resistant, maybe it is time to say, I got an idea. You know what? I'd like to come to your annual physical with you. Let's talk about this. I
yeah,
think it'd be really helpful if I tell your doctors what I've been experiencing because you're a different guy and I'm scared.
yeah. No, it's a really good point. And I think that for a lot of people, having that kind of conversation can be very difficult, because it's sensitive, right?
Of
Especially
course.
if you've been with somebody that has led this very, as you said before, this really vibrant life. And suddenly, they haven't changed their clothes in 3 days and they're starting to smell. And it's just not pleasant. And also, I think, that with regard to sex, men place so much emphasis on their erections.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
and so when they don't have them, it's sort of like, what's going on? What am I going to do now? I mean,
Mhm.
talking about sex, is there any way that you try and address um, that circumstance?
I talk about that probably at least on a weekly basis with my patients. And that is
Really?
one of the biggest topics I have because, masculinity and manhood is so associated with erection. So, the folks that are probably the hardest for me to work with are the people that have experienced a huge medical illness, whether they've had cancer and they literally can't perform anymore. You know,
Yeah.
Basically, it's reprogramming and it's retraining the brain on how to perform sexually, what is desirable, and how our bodies and lives evolve. For instance, if the man is unable to have erections, let's just say ever again, in those extreme cases of medical circumstances, there are
Yeah.
plenty of different ways you can please each other without an erection.
Yeah.
There's plenty of things, he could do to his female partner. They can, screw around. There's plenty of things. Maybe this
Yeah.
is a time, and people always kind of give me this shocked look like, have you guys experimented with toys before? Have you done different things together? Sometimes even just an erotic massage for a man would be very comfortable and helpful. But if they're in a long-term relationship, or even a short-term relationship for that matter, it is training both of them to respect and understand this difference. Because
Yeah.
nothing is worse and nothing is a bigger erection killer than the judgment of what the hell's wrong with you. And I hear that from 30-year-olds up to 70-year-olds. And it's cringy because they clearly want the erection. They're doing their best. If they can't have the erection, okay, clearly we're not going to have penetrative sex right now. But then it's this horrendous vicious cycle of, okay, now I have proof that there's something wrong with me. Now she's upset with me. And right down the rabbit hole we go.
Yeah. And I hear a lot from men that sometimes their partner thinks that their lack of erectile function is down to them not feeling attracted to them
Yep.
anymore, right?
Mhm.
So they think that this thing is not behaving because when they see their partner, they're not getting all excited, whereas
Right.
their brain may be getting very excited, but just nothing's happening downstairs. And I
Yes.
think that women sometimes struggle with that. And, I know I do that
Sure.
when you're in the middle of something and suddenly it goes, you're like, "Oh god, what happened? Did
Yeah.
something just happen to make that, what's occurring right now?" And then you realize, no, they just have to go to the toilet.
They ate too much at dinner. They're worried about that meeting they have tomorrow. The baseball game's still on. Oh, sometimes it's
Exactly.
not that deep.
Mostly, it's not that deep. I would
Mostly it's
say that
not that deep.
mostly it's
Yes.
not that deep, and it's worth
Yes.
reminding women that mostly it's not that deep,
It
right?
and what I like to remind, especially when I'm in couples work, or even if I have an individual female, if in couples work, it's way easier because they're both there. And if she's like, well, I don't think he's attracted to me, I used to walk by and he saw half a boob and he was hard for the next hour. I'm like, okay, well, things change. I said, do I want you to answer me honestly? Do you think this man doesn't want to have an erection? Do you think he doesn't want to have sex? He was
Yeah.
the one, if he, proposed this idea to you, he wants to be there. Things happen, life happens. And I always give those examples. I said, well, as we as females get very distracted during sex, so do men.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you could be on the verge of orgasm and then you think, oh shit, did I call that guy back? Oh my God. Wait, oh my God. Did I schedule the babysitter? Are my kids gonna be home alone tomorrow? And now you've completely forgot you're having sex and you're
Yeah.
not gonna get anywhere near that. Men do the exact same thing. And
Yeah,
once the
yeah.
erection goes, yes, you can recover, but now there's all the emotional stuff attached to it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really that's true. Like, we all do get distracted. I can't
Yes.
stand music with lyrics personally. Like, as soon as
Me too, actually. That's funny you mention that because I start singing the song in my head.
I honestly just if anybody puts on music with lyrics, if I know that tune, I'm like waiting for the chorus. I'm just I'm like, "I'm never gonna come now. I'm never gonna come.
Yes,
This is not feeling good anymore."
right.
So, look, there are so many different things that can distract us, and it's worth reminding us ourselves about that. And I think, going back to this whole thing about medication, I've spoken to doctors and they're like, look, there are SSRIs that don't impact erectile function like some
Yes.
other ones do.
Mhm.
So I think also we have to know that some drugs are really bad when it comes to getting erections,
Yes.
and some drugs have less of an effect. So if getting an erection is really important to you, then find drugs that are going to support that desire,
Yes.
not one you're going to take it away, right?
Completely agree with that. And that's one thing I do tell people because if you tell a doctor without mentioning, we're great at complaining, but we don't tell them what we want.
Yeah,
So when a man goes in and says, look, I've been in, I quit my job 6 months ago. My wife's still working. So honestly, I'm sitting home all day. I'm depressed. I'm bored. I've gained 10 pounds. I, feel like I'm worthless. If you just put pause on that, the doctor's going to say, oh, okay, great. I'm going to prescribe you A, B, and C. And they're not saying, but by the way, and a lot of medical doctors don't think about that second step, which is where, frankly, my work comes in. Tell them
yeah,
what you want. Tell them you still, I'm happy to report I still have an active sex life with my wife. We try to, be together, X amount of times. I still want to be able to do this.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
when you tell your doctor what you need and want, they can prescribe medications. There's a couple combinations that are quite popular over here that have, they're excellent SSRIs that really help with the depression, but they make people have the flatus affect. The first week or
right.
so, you might feel like you're a zombie. But then there's
Yeah,
another medication they can prescribe that will kind of almost pull you back up to normality. So it balances the negative side effects. So I would highly recommend to anybody, who's listening or thinking about it, that tell them what you want out of it.
And it's a really good point about I just came back from a 2-day event, which was mainly about healthcare and aging, and mainly it was quite depressing actually about
Oh,
about how we need to support older people and all the ways that we do this, and it was about the kind of silver economy, but because it was funded mainly by drug companies,
mhm.
the emphasis was mainly on healthcare and not
Okay.
on sex. There was nothing about
Great.
sex actually,
Okay.
but what came through in one particular conversation panel discussion was this need to understand the whole person when you're going to see your doctor in
Yes.
whatever way, whatever kind of doctor you're seeing, right?
Mhm.
And so instead of just addressing the one problem that you might be going for, which is, oh, my blood pressure is very high at the moment, and you're going to give me a blood pressure medication that's going to lower it.
Yep.
And that's now going to impact on my erectile
That's
function
right. That's
potentially,
right.
right? I have to say, okay, what else, other changes do I need to make in my life to be able to, just improve my health, my overall
Yes.
health, so that I'm just not reliant on these pharmaceuticals all the time.
Mhm.
And it was, and as I was listening to it, I was thinking, well, there's a few issues around that in that idealistic vision that we have of going to the doctor, and the doctor is really concerned about our whole
Of
being
course.
because mostly they don't give a shit about our whole being, mainly, I hate to
Correct.
say, but
I
they're
agree.
just they're just there to address the problem. But the second thing is that in the UK, when you see your GP, they are told that they have 10 minutes to deal with each
Yeah.
patient, right?
Mhm.
Like, I
Yep.
don't know how it works in the States, but in the UK, it's 10 minutes.
Yep. Yep.
So in 10 minutes, you have just got enough time to explain the problem,
Right.
never
Right.
mind the scenario around the problem, right? So we've almost got to, when we go into a doctor, like a little script that's going to be really short and it's going to say
It's
like,
so anxiety provoking hearing about your medical system. It really is. It's so anxiety provoking that it's,
right.
like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
you're exactly right. Like if you're coming in, I have high blood pressure. That right. I mean, describing how you're experiencing that and what you're going through is going to take up probably 5 to 6 minutes of your time.
Yep.
Then he's going to say, I need you to do this and this. We're not even talking about your romantic relationship, your activities. Oh, I like to rock climb. Like you probably shouldn't do that. Like nobody talks about all that. And that, so these kind of like ding, ding. Okay, your appointments. I'd be like, well, okay, I'll see you again in 5 months when you can get your next appointment.
Absolutely.
Literally.
Yeah, and that's the way it goes, and when I think about this, it's like you almost have to go in with an agenda, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
very summarized, so
Mhm.
that you're like, "Here's how I'm feeling, this is what I'm doing, this is my life, this is the kind of stuff
Right.
I like to do. I still wanna have sex with my wife. I
Yeah.
want you to consider that." Like,
Yeah.
because
You're
otherwise
exactly right.
you're just gonna get a drug,
Right.
that deals with a problem, and
Mhm.
that may lead to a whole series of other problems that then require you to go back in and say, "God, that sorted out that one, but, downstairs is not
Yeah.
happy about it." Right?
You're exactly right, and I'll take it even a step further with complaining to doctors is it's a very, very intimidating process to go tell your doctor you're having erectile problems, and I've attended these seminars, similar to, the conferences that you have, where I wanna just kinda shout on the rooftops, ask your patients. Ask
Yeah,
them how they're doing. That question doesn't seem to be it's in question number 25 out of the 28 they're gonna ask you, which,
yeah,
different but it's not nobody talks about the pleasurable parts of life. They focus on, oh, so you eat McDonald's 3 days a week. Oh, well, we gotta cut that up. But, and I'm being silly by saying that, but it's hard to address that with your doctor when your doctor doesn't appear to be interested.
yeah,
And it's really challenging for the person experiencing something that's already, it could be humiliating, it could be uncomfortable, it causes depression, anxiety, affects your relationship.
yeah,
So it's really challenging to say, hi, basically stranger doctor. By the way, oh, I haven't had an erection in 2 months. So I do encourage patients to be able to talk about these things and almost start with that. And I completely agree with you about the script because, I'll be honest, I take little notes before I see my
yeah,
doctor because there always is that urgency. Maybe you have to, maybe if you're really that uncomfortable to talk about it, you could hand them a little post-it note like, I've been experiencing, heart palpitations, lack of erection, sleepless nights. Truly, because it's such a big part of our lives, and it's something that should be continuously in our lives. And, a lot of people, don't want to address it.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about men and about depression and how does all of this stuff, because there are women obviously experiencing very similar things,
Yes.
especially around, when we get into menopause and just feeling perhaps just not very desirable. I know that the hot flashes just didn't make me feel sexy at all while they were in their at their peak. I was,
Yeah.
just sweating. There's nothing more attractive than your back dripping with sweat while you're sleeping next to somebody to,
Right.
how do you, because I find this is one of the most challenging areas is that whilst men may initially just go off for the blue pill or, go
Right.
for the antidepressant and then have to figure out, oh, this didn't, this worked for this, but didn't work for that. What do you see happening with women around their mental health?
It's such a good topic because women try to be so strong. And in circles of women, it's much easier to talk about, your menopausal symptoms or your postmenopausal symptoms. I think, in a perfect world, you would, hit the topic on directly. Honey, I got to tell you, I don't know if you've noticed, I haven't been feeling like myself lately. I just have had, I've been sweating. I'm uncomfortable. My sex drive is shit. I wanted you to know that it's nothing about us. But privately, to be able to understand these things that it's not our faults. It's not our faults that, out of nowhere, your hormones are shifting, changing. You look in the mirror and don't recognize yourself today. Our bodies are shifting, weight is forming in different areas or losing volume in certain other areas. It
Yeah,
can be really demoralizing for a lot of women. And I think to be able to just, first of all, get some support when you're dealing with that, find a group of women that you can openly talk about this stuff. Talk to your doctor. There are some remedies out there. And for sex life, there's the issue of dryness or lack of desire, or, sex becomes really uncomfortable. If you don't have the desire and you don't have the proper lubrication because your body is against you right now, it's a recipe for, not a very fun night.
no.
We can look at all the cliche things, which are not, I mean, they're excellent, but to buy, lubrications that are appropriate for your body, talk to your doctors about it, to call your gynecologist and say, I'm experiencing this. What do you suggest? But again, it needs to be a topic to be talked about because I feel like so many women suffer in silence
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there's almost this kind of like, I don't know how to put it, not a stereotype, but just this idea of, well, I have to be strong, I'm fine, but you're not fine. Your body's changing by the hour sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've had some very exciting news. You probably are aware this week that the FDA removed the black box warning from estrogen related
Yes.
products, which means
Yes.
that things like vaginal estrogen, for example, which were like a lifesaver for me when I was experiencing dryness and are now just like
Mhm.
they've completely changed everything. They're just
Very exciting news. Yes.
they've removed the black box warning from that, which means
Mhm.
that a lot of women who thought that it might lead to cancer, that's
Right.
no longer the case.
Mhm.
And, in the majority of circumstances. So that's, I think, hopefully now that that black box warning has been removed, at least doctors will feel more inclined to issue prescriptions for this stuff, which obviously can just transform your sex life. They
Yes.
literally can transform it. And I think when I tell women that, mostly they don't know about it
Mhm.
because I think the black box warnings put them off. And they say,
Absolutely.
"Oh,
Yeah.
I can't have that. That's really bad for you," and all of this. So I think that was probably one of the most exciting developments that I'd heard about recently.
Well, it's huge because I mean, I've had plenty of jokes with my patients or friends to say, I mean, if menopause hit men, this would have been covered 50 years ago. We would have found a cure, a solution, a magic pill. But, a lot of women suffer in silence again. And you're absolutely right that there is that kind of like, HRT is bad for me. I know this, neighbor of a cousin of an uncle, blah, blah, who had, there's always, everybody has that obscure story. Well, Sally got breast cancer from that. Like, but did she? You know, it, no, in all seriousness, I mean, it
No,
increased the rate
exactly.
by like literally some benign percentage, not benign, but 7 to
No,
10% out of a million people type
it's very
thing
low.
when they're already predisposed to having breast cancer in their families. So, you
Exactly.
know, but they have to, the FDA is a very powerful place. And they, when we have those people that X person, had this, they have to put that on there to make sure they don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
very,
anyway,
very exciting news.
it is very exciting news. I'm very excited about it myself. And I think that, the more that we remove the stigma around a lot of this stuff, but also understand, I only again recently found out about the impact of SSRIs on erectile function and
Mm,
how it wasn't necessarily the same for all SSRIs, that some
right,
were better than others. And I think with all of this, it's about knowing that you have a choice. I mean, for a lot
right,
of these people, it's about knowing, okay, that didn't work, but
right,
this one, this might work.
right.
This didn't work. And how much you prioritize your sex life is, of course, very personal.
Mhm.
But if you prioritize your sex life and suddenly you feel flat and like
Yeah,
you have no desire, or
sure.
then there are things that you can do about it. I think
Absolutely.
that's for me the main thing, is that there are professionals like yourself, there are doctors you can go and talk to. If we remove the shame from all of this, then the likelihood is we can find a solution to the problem. But if we don't talk about it, then nothing's going to change,
And
really.
you're absolutely right. And to go back to the SSRIs, if somebody is kind of anti-medication, there are plenty of things you can holistically do. And, I always do ask my patients before they jump to medications, like, okay, so you mentioned you've been really bored lately. Like, well, when was the last time you worked out? I know, didn't you used to go, biking? You know what? I just haven't made it on my bike in 3 months. I'm like,
Yeah,
well, I've been a little lax with the diet. I've been, I haven't gone to church. I haven't done this. So let's put yourself back, kind of let's hit the reset button. Pay attention to what you haven't done and what you are doing now, and
yeah,
let's see if we can get some of those things. Again, I love the holistic approach of let's get some exercise every day. Even folks that, can you walk to your mailbox and back? Just can you get some form of, sunshine? And it's a little more complicated in England, but to get outside and get that fresh air on your face,
yeah,
just to have a difference. When is the last time you called your friend? When is the last time even you've gone to dinner with somebody?
yeah,
Let's
yeah,
see what, in like a societal type perspective, then let's go to the medication, because,
yeah,
with Western medicine, we throw pills at everything.
yeah,
And those are awesome. A lot of them work amazing. But if they work in conjunction with diet and health and exercise and meditation and, Tai Chi and whatnot, it can greatly help you. And especially for sex life, we don't feel good about ourselves. Like if somebody is a regular exerciser or a regular worker and they're moving their bodies, when they are stagnant, they become stagnant. They become mentally stagnant.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I always do encourage people to kind of, get out there because it always makes us feel better to, be physical.
No, absolutely. And, there is scientific evidence that exercise does reduce the symptoms of depression, like
Hmm.
high intensity exercise does
Yeah.
reduce symptoms of depression. So that's a real thing. And
Yeah.
I know a friend of mine took herself after many years off an SSRI because she realized that actually she was just relying on it for everything. It's like,
Mhm. Mhm.
this thing is going to make me feel better. And
Yeah.
she just thought, I've got to find other ways to feel better that
Hmm.
don't make me so reliant on this pill.
Right.
And one of those ways was just getting back into physical activity
Hmm.
and just getting
Absolutely.
back to exercise. So it's a really good point of just what are those other things that you can do in your life that made you feel good? It's something that Esther Perel, she did an exercise that I enjoyed and did with a partner years ago, which was writing on a Post-it note to I turn myself on when,
Oh,
I
I like that.
turn myself off when. So I turn myself on when wasn't necessarily about sexually turning
Hmm.
yourself on, like when I use a vibrator. It could be
Hmm.
I turn myself on, speaking personally, when I sing in front of an audience because I'm a
Hmm.
singer and I love singing. So
Okay.
I turn myself off on when I'm singing in front of an audience. I turn myself off when I spend too much time on social media scrolling
Yeah.
and I'm not doing anything that's actually a benefit to me. It's
Love that.
just a massive distraction, right?
Mhm.
And each of these and it was just this kind of thing that you could exchange with your partner so that they became more aware of the things that gave you joy in your life.
Yeah.
Because in the circumstance of the person that I did this with, he went back into being a visual artist and he did struggle with depression. But
Mm.
when he was painting and drawing and stuff, he was a
Yeah.
totally different guy, right?
Hmm.
So it's about what are those things in your life that give you joy?
Mhm.
And they don't necessarily have to be sexual things. They can just
Absolutely
be
not. Yeah.
things you like, you know?
Well, like you said, you're the guy that was a painter, you're a singer, or, the person who's an avid, cyclist or yoga. I think also it has something to do with in a little bit of control. It's something I can control. If I can get myself to yoga 3 times a week, that's a place of
Yeah.
pride.
Yeah.
Folks that are, again, the drastic lifestyle changes, like retirement again, or whether it's a choice or it was forced or however it looks.
Yeah.
If you don't feel you have control in those situations, it is going to increase your anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
So, like for the person, like you said, your painting friend, that if you just choose not to do it, you know, that's not going to be helpful for you. But if you can say, you know what, I'm going to spend 10 minutes tomorrow doing this, or it
Yeah.
will increase those endorphins that are so, unfortunately missing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, going back to the first case study that we sort of suggested of this guy who's retired and he doesn't really know what to do. It's about, it is about finding those things in your life that give you joy, even if it means going out and doing something you've never done before,
Yeah.
because you've got to find something good
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
do. Because sitting on the sofa just chilling isn't going to really do it for you or your partner.
It's not going to do it for you. No.
But yeah, I mean, I think that it's sometimes the hardest thing is just getting started.
Absolutely. And you know what? And I don't want to downplay how hard it is to get started because, we're all creatures of habit. If we're not used, and we've also been talking a lot about couples today, but there's also those individuals out there that maybe they don't have their partner anymore. Maybe they've gone through, they're a widow, they're divorced, they've chosen to be single for a while. It's hard to get back out there,
Yeah,
and to think about that, like, well, my body looks different, or it's a good time to really focus on the things that you value and maybe look back like if my 20-year-old self was sitting here on the couch, what would I go do tonight? Well, I'd go to the bar. Why don't you go to the bar now? Is there a local restaurant you want to go to? Have you called your friend? Oh, I like that sporting event. Well, why don't you go watch the sporting event at a local place type thing?
yeah,
Think about what you used to enjoy because again, we're all on the grind. Whether we love our jobs, love our relationships, that's irrelevant when we just think about the nonstop pace of all of our lives. So,
yeah,
sitting down and relaxing and being able to say, what's going to bring me joy? I love that phrase, what's going to bring me joy? And I like the idea of that exercise of, what's not going to bring me joy. And
yeah, yeah.
sitting is
Because
probably
I
not
think,
bringing me joy.
yeah, and for me, I really enjoyed that exercise because it was about acknowledging the things that just aren't good for me, right?
Yeah.
The things that make me feel bad about myself
Hmm.
and that give me, yeah, they just don't make me happy. So
Hmm.
I think also for me, hearing from my then partner about things that turn him off.
Yeah.
Um, some of them was about uncontrolled eating and other
Hmm.
challenges that he had. And that made me really sensitive also to when I was seeing particular behaviors that
Okay.
I knew were not good
Hmm.
behaviors, like to stop him on, like go, well, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like
Excellent. Yeah.
you're going and you're just eating a bunch of shit. Like what's
Yeah.
happening?
Right.
What's that about? Right.
Right.
So
But
it's
that's
just
also an act of love too, because he
yeah.
told you that that's something that he doesn't like, and you're now helping him and support him with that.
Yeah, yeah. So I really love that exercise because it was yeah, it was didn't feel like there was any blame attached to it, and it was
Mhm.
just a way to share with another person the things that give me joy and the things that really piss me off about myself.
Yeah.
It just yeah, it's just more insight. Anyway,
Mhm.
Karen, we've reached the end of this
Okay,
wonderful
thank you.
episode. And it's been so great to chat to you. And you're probably going to go off and eat some breakfast now. And I'm going
Something
to
like that.
I'm gonna chill in front of the
Sounds
sofa
good.
and
Go relax.
catch up on the morning show. Yeah.
Okay, deal. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you
Take
again.
care.
Nice to meet you. Take care.